Kate Mila-Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen, and welcome back, returning subscribers. Welcome to new subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, why not? Everybody sign up. Everybody get your cousins, aunts, uncles, next door neighbors to sign up. I would appreciate it very much. Getting a little difficult to navigate the algorithm these days. I'm sure you're hearing it from everybody. And really, putting myself aside for the moment, just for the moment, check all of your subscriptions that you are fond of watching and make sure that they are still subscribed, because they are mysteriously disappearing. So having said that, you may or may not have noticed that the book I've been covering on Saturdays recently is The Mothman Prophecies. I read this book when it first came out, and I had forgotten a lot of it. I had a very vague one-sentence memory of what it was about. The author, I decided I was going to invite him to come talk on the channel. Except he's dead, and I don't have one of those magic phones like my former guest with the phone calls from the dead. I can't. Dr. Callum Cooper. So I didn't know how to get in touch with John Keel, RIP. So I decided I would just talk to you a little bit about his life, because he's a very interesting individual. More respected in the area of UFO literature than I understood. So let's get to work here. His full name is John Alva Keel. He was born March 5th, 1930 in Hornell, New York. His parents, one was a singer and one was a band leader, but there was no clarity on that. I'm going to assume his mother was a singer. I could be wrong, but band leader in the 30s, probably a guy. They divorced, and he was raised by his mother's parents in Percy or Perry, New York, depending on how you decipher my hieroglyphics here, until his mother remarried, and then he went to live with her. He was called Houdini by all of his friends because he loved magic. He was an avid reader and writer. He published his first story in a magician's magazine when he was 12. That's remarkable. By 14, he determined that he wanted to be a writer for the rest of his life. He actually had a column at the age of 14 in the local Perry Herald, the newspaper, called it's clever, Scraping the Keel. He published some science fiction writing in a fanzine, so this was geared towards science fiction fans. His article was called Lunarite. He often submitted stories to magazines in New York. At 16, he had taken every single science course his high school offered, so he quit to write full time. Well, I guess you would call him single-minded. At 17, good luck trying to do that today. At 17, he moved to New York City, into Greenwich Village, got an apartment. He edited at a poetry magazine. He freelanced writing. He was a script writer for television and radio. And he wrote an article for a number of different publications. I'm not going to tell you the name of this. I can't figure out how to say it without getting in trouble with YouTube. But keep in mind, he was 17. He got drafted for the Korean War, and he was assigned to the American Forces Network in Frankfurt, Germany. Lucky break for him. He wrote radio programs for the military. He became the chief of network production very young. He was a real go-getter. At the end of 2 years, he was offered a civilian job. I guess he got out in 2 years, and he was offered a civilian job working for the Army, but not in the Army. He claimed that he was trained in the Army. This is later in his life. He was trained in the Army in psychological warfare and to be a propaganda writer. He later went on to be a foreign radio correspondent in Paris, Berlin, Rome, and Egypt. So he got to travel a lot. I think that comment that he made about learning to do propaganda, I think that's a fact we should tuck into the back of our minds and keep it in mind when we are reading the Mothman prophecies. I think we need to be discerning. It's important to keep that in mind. At 24, he resigned from this job to travel to all around the Middle East and Southeast Asia, and which he did for 4 years. He sought out magicians and magic tricks, like the magic rope trick. I'm not sure I know what that is. He learned things from, I'm going to say fakir. He looked for Yeti. He went on a Yeti hunt. And he wrote all about this. In 1957, he published a book called Jadoo, Jadoo, that covered all of this traveling that he did and what he learned. In 1960s, he wrote for television. There was a whole list of shows he was on. I'm getting the hiccups, I'm sorry. He wrote the name of the first one. It was called a game show called Play Your Hunch. Then there was a whole big long list and I didn't recognize any of them. But then I did recognize Get Smart, The Monkees, and Lost in Space. He used a pseudonym, Harry Gibbs, and published novels under that name. He wrote in 1966 a book called The Fickle Finger of Fate and sold 600,000 copies. In 1966, Playboy was advertising for articles about UFOs. He applied, but his work was rejected. But now, suddenly, he just saw that call for an article. That wasn't necessarily his area of interest, but he made it his area of interest in order to produce the article because he wanted to get published in Playboy. Well, that didn't happen, but it lit the fire of interest about UFOs. So he said that he wrote a book called Operation Trojan Horse. And in that book, he talked about the thousands of people he interviewed face to face in 20 different states, and he tells their stories. Later, in 1975, he wrote this book, The Mothman Prophecies, and did extensive research in West Virginia. He claims that he spoke to so many people that he found witnesses and contactees that nobody had ever spoken to because they were embarrassed or afraid to come forward. He met a reporter who wrote for the local small newspaper, and they worked together. She was really interested in what he had heard and the stories that she had been told, and she actually had some experiences. They're in the book, and they worked together quite a bit. She signed a legal affidavit attesting to the things that they talked about under oath with a notary and all that stuff. He published interviews and opinions in many UFO magazines. He really gained a name for himself. In 1968 to 69, he was the technical advisor to the Library of Congress. In 68 to 71, he was the special consultant to the Office of Scientific Research and the Bureau of Radiology. He was the consultant to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and a member of the Screen Actors Guild. He lived in an apartment in the Upper West Side of Manhattan for decades. He died in New York City, July 3rd, 2009, at the age of 79. I could not find one single thing about his personal life. I think he must have been a loner. He had a reputation as one of ufology's most widely read and influential authors. He was considered original and controversial. He's often been called the Hunter S. Thompson of the paranormal writers. He invented the term Men in Black. In 1967, he wrote about it in Saga magazine. he went into ufology hoping to validate, he heard all these stories and he wanted to validate that, oh, ETs, extraterrestrials. Um, at the time, I don't think they were called that as much as they were just called aliens, and they called their vehicles flying saucers. And it's fun to read the book because it is stuck in the past, but it's interesting. But these visitors were widely assumed to be from some other planet. But like J. Allen Hynek, that name should ring a bell, and Jacques Vallée, one of my heroes, Keel eventually concluded that it wasn't tenable for these to only be from other planets. He said, this is a quote, I abandoned the ET hypotheses in 1967 when my own field investigations, that would be this, disclosed an astonishing overlap between psychic phenomena and UFOs. Therefore, he said, they don't necessarily originate on another planet. I don't think he excluded the potential for some of them. They may not even exist as permanent constructions of matter. That's quite a statement. It's more likely that we see what we want to see and interpret such visions according to our contemporary beliefs. His argument was that some non-human or spiritual intelligent source has staged events over very long periods of time on the earth to propagate and reinforce erroneous belief systems. He compares this list: monsters, ghosts, demons, middle-aged fairies, not fairies in their 40s, but medieval fairies, vampires, legends, mysterious airships, as in 1897, mysterious planes, as in the 1930s and moving forward, mystery helicopters, which is a more modern thing, anomalous creatures, cryptoids, poltergeist phenomenon, spheres of light, UFOs. He puts them all in the same box. He says they're all anomalous and they're all covers for a real phenomenon on Earth that we don't understand, that present themselves as they think we will relate. He calls them ultraterrestrials, that ETs are non-human entities able to shapeshift. He proposed the existence of a vast electromagnetic spectrum beyond human perception. We're kind of in the soup of it, and within which non-human intelligences operate. And extrapolating from that, we are all possessors of an electromagnetic field around us, which is really our consciousness, uses our brain as a tool to connect to that spectrum. So some people can tune in to the future or tune in to something elsewhere in the earth at a distance, tune in to the past, or communicate with entities or the dead, because it's that information in the field. UFOs are the same category as this big long list, he said. Paranormal phenomena are ghosts, like UFOs are related to that. They're paranormal phenomena and ghosts and UFOs and religious apparitions. He just lumps them all together and says they've been trying to shape human belief systems from the beginning of human history. Jacques Vallée was onto that, Passport to Magonia, which I covered a long time ago. And maybe I need to go back and do it again. Keel says that they're not visitors, ETs, that they're not extraterrestrial out of here. They are advanced Earth civilization, maybe, which may or may not be human. Some may be interdimensional. He's speculating. He didn't state the purpose. He didn't really speculate about that. He says UFO intelligence has long-time interest in interaction with humans. Why? A skeptic, John C. Sherwood, in the Skeptical Inquirer issue of May and June of 2002, talked about this. Now, Gray Barker is a ufologist who often was in contact with Keel. They shared ideas, did some investigating together. In the Skeptical Inquirer, Sherwood titles his article Gray Barker's Book of Bunk. And he said that he found significant differences between Keel's investigative notes and what he put in the book Mothman. And Keel refused to deal with the skeptic guy. He just said, you go ahead and worry about the discrepancies. I don't really want to deal with you. It has been said by his friend Mark Coppola that Keel, quote, could look at people and tell exactly when they were going to die. Now, I thought, boy, that name sounds familiar, Mark Coppola. So, I looked it up. And the first thing I found out was that he was Nicolas Cage's brother. Am I the last person in the world to find out that Nicolas Cage is a nephew of Francis Ford Coppola? I didn't know that. And then it gets even better. There's so many people I don't know about who are related to other people that I don't know about. So Mark Coppola, who was very close friends all of his life with John Keel, who is the brother of Nicolas Cage, the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, is also the cousin of Jason Schwartzman. I had no idea who that was. And I looked him up, and he looked familiar, and I don't know why. I've seen him in something. But he's, I guess, in those Superman, superhero type movies, and I don't watch those. So that's what he's famous for. His mother is Talia Shire. She's Francis Ford Coppola's sister. She's Nicolas Cage and Mark Coppola's aunt. And she was Rocky's girlfriend in the first Rocky movie. She was also in one of the Godfather movies, like a peripheral relative. That's all I have about John Keel. I really couldn't find a whole lot of stuff. I'm really disappointed that I never got to speak with him, but that may still come about. Stay tuned. Watch for my conversations with Deborah Lupien. And in the meantime, if you have a request for any particular event or person or mystery or ET book, I'm not saying that they're from another planet. I'm not saying they're not. What do I know? But the vernacular people relate to what you're talking about. Yes. Visitors from flying saucers. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure that you are still subscribed and to other channels you usually subscribe to. And please spread the word. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. Slongafoil. Slancha.